Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we will discuss a module on Aboriginal Australian short story. This module is prepared by Sayantan Mondol, research scholar, Center for Comparative Literature, University of Hyderabad. Ideas about the term Aborigines before the European settlement in 1788 were for the most part derogatory. William Dampier saw them as the miserable people in the world, and Captain James Cook too had a similar version to offer. Aboriginal people and their culture was looked down as not worthy of respect, a barbaric horde of naked, treacherously armed, and extremely coward creatures who acted when fear prompted them. In the earliest poetry emanating from the colonies, the Aborigines were portrayed more as objects of curiosity, like other Antipodean fauna, than as individuals in their own right. With the spread of exploration and settlement, contact between white men and the outlying tribal Aborigines intensified. In the sphere of the novel, one of the earliest to feature the Aboriginal experience was the anonymously authored Alfred Dudley, or the Australian Settler, 1830. This is a rare depiction in fiction of some possible humanity granted to the Aborigine. Bushrangers and Aborigines, true to the spirit of Australia, were to be feared and kept at bay. In Tales of the Colonies, or The Adventures of an Immigrant in 1843, and The Bushranger of Van Diemen's Land, 1846, and in later texts like Thomas Maccombe's Arabian or The Adventures of a Colonist in New South Wales, 1845. Such instances of Aborigine misconceptions are quite rampant. Alexander Harris' The Emigrant Family or The Story of an Australian Settler in 1849 and James Tucker's Ralph Rushleg, written in 1840s but not published in full until 1952, hint at an important divide: the appropriation of farmlands by squatters and a resentment from the Aborigines whose natures were otherwise peaceful and non-avaricious. The squatters had the most prolonged and closest contact with the Aborigines, a contact that inevitably entailed dispossession and violence. Memoirs and reminiscences reflecting the dynamics of such a relationship continued in the second half of the 19th century. Amateurish and ethnographic account of the Aborigines continued from the 1840s onwards. In the second half of the 19th century, the Aboriginal presence in literature was more pronounced, with poets like Charles Harper in his poem An Aboriginal Mother's Lament, or Ned Corner, or Henry Kendall's early Aboriginal poem like The Creek of the Four Crabs or Aboriginal Death Songs, 1862. Fiction offered very less sensitization of the already prevailing Aboriginal stereotype. During the turn of the century, no magic line of demarcation in the mutual relationship between the Aboriginals and the whites surfaced. It was only after the Second World War that acceptance of Aboriginals through parliamentary legislation and their integration and rights became a topic of concern and consensus. Against the backdrop of these facts and ideas, one needs to look deeper into what shapes the Aboriginal sensibility while integrating aspects of storytelling in a narrative mode. The study of validation of Aboriginal culture through Aboriginal myth and ritual was a direction in this respect. The publication of Catherine Langlock Farrick's Australian Legendary Tales 1896 and More Australian Legendary Tales 1898 was the starting point for the popularization of Aboriginal tribal stories and songs. In the 1930s, the Zindi Orobak desired to present Aboriginal lore as an attempt to understand, revive, and re-establish the cultural topography of Australia. Better was imbibed by Roland Robinson, whose numerous volumes include Legend and Dreaming, 1952, The Feathered Serpent, 1956, and Aboriginal Myths and Legends, 1966. Aboriginal writers such as Kath Walker, Dick Rugsey, and David Unaipon took an upper hand in the collection and dissemination of tribal stories and legends. Various internationally acclaimed volumes of Aboriginal lore have appeared in recent times. The Dreamtime Book 1973 with paintings by Ainsley Roberts and text by Charles P. Mountford, Australian Dreaming 1980, compiled and edited by Jennifer Isaacs, and Dreamtime, The Aboriginal Heritage 1981 are a few names to reckon with. Aboriginal fiction writers at the turn of the century include Mrs. Aeneas Kwan, whose two short stories, The Little Black Princess 1905 and We of the Never Never 1908, are classic examples of the patronizing but totally short-sighted approach of many well-intentioned Australians towards the Aboriginal. In her Tales of Elsie Station and the Never Never Land, the Aboriginal is a crossbreed between a flawed human and a lovable domestic animal. It goes to the credit of the English biologist E.L. Grant Watson, who produced an interesting fictional treatment of Aboriginals, but this was due to his close proximity with fellow biologist Radcliffe Brown and Daisy Bates. People who inhabited and worked with Kimberley blacks and diseased blacks from the Bernier Island Isolation Hospital. His story out there portrays the triangular relationship between a white man with a white woman and a black woman simultaneously. It is for the very first time that a sense of harmony and purpose, even grace, is infused into this mutual relationship that exists for itself and in its own right. Out there is a perfect example of the long lived stigma of a white man who has morally degraded himself by being a black. Through their fictional accounts, Vance Palmer and Catherine Susanna Pritchard introduced new directions, new dimensions of black-white sexual relations, which are shortly liberating. But circuitous and often deadly in their impact on the moral fabric of society. Palmer's The Man Hamilton, 1928, and Men Are Human, and K.S. Pritchard's Cunardo are perfect examples of this abiding dichotomy in black versus white male-female relationships. This sexual divide between black and white races is taken up by other short stories of Pritchard like Happiness and the Kubu. Kath Walker, better known as Odgero of the tribe Nunankal from 1988 onwards, was a seminal figure in the field of indigenous contemporary Australia. She wrote a collection of stories published as Stradbroke Dreamtime, 1972. The first section, consisting of stories taking into account memories from her childhood on North Stradbroke Island, and the second stories from the old and new Dreamtime symbolizing the mythological past of the Aborigines. These stories spelled an altogether new engagement with chronicling traditional lore and making excursions into the mythically illumined landscapes of her country. This preoccupation with the landscape as the center and focal point of consciousness makes us realize the concept of indigenous spirituality that goes hand in hand with the perpetuation of Aboriginal culture. In the 1980s and 1990s, Walker published books of legends and drawings including Father Sky and Mother Earth, 1981. The Rainbow Serpent, 1988, written with her younger son. Australian Legends and Landscapes, 1990, and Australia's Unwritten History, More Legends of Our Land, 1992. Beer edited a book of Walker's artwork, Kwanda Muka, The Art of Kath Walker, in 1985. Most of her writings and drawings in this text relate to her homeland of Minjeriba, but she also collected stories from elsewhere. The first three of these works in particular take up a concern with the land and environmental issues, wedded to reform and education, as is reflected and reiterated again and again in Australian Legends and Landscapes. Australian literature, besides recreating the lost Aborigine world, has also to its credit acclaimed writers straddling the adult world and making crossovers to the arena of children's literature. Colin Thiele, for example, is one such writer who has for more than 50 years delighted children, parents, and teachers with his stories. More than 20 of his books remain in print, from a highly productive writing life with additions every year. In Thiele, there is a remarkable human quality that appeals to children, coupled with an abiding love of the Australian landscape and its people within the confines of even the simplest of stories. Thiele said in a 2002 interview that he has enjoyed writing part-time. The part-time writer can work out and hold on to the integrity of the book. Thiele's collection, The Rim of the Morning, 6 Stories 1966, was found in many school libraries in the 1960s and 1970s. One of the 6 stories, Storm Boy, became the best known of Thiele's works. The story of Storm Boy and his pelican, Mr. Percival, is known to thousands of children and was made into a successful movie with the help of the South Australian Film Corporation. Storm Boy lives with his father on the Coorong, a wilderness more beautiful than one can imagine. On a southern Australian coast, fraught with an array of birds and fishermen whose only earned is living by and living in the lap of nature. Storm Boy spends his days happily with his father, an old Aboriginal friend, and his pelican on the beach. From this beach, Mr. Percival helps to rescue a distressed ship, but in the process, he is shot by duck hunters because he learns to frighten away the ducks from their shotguns. The death of Mr. Percival teaches young Storm Boy some hard lessons about the fragility of life and the importance of mutual trust and respect, not only between people, but also between people and those living creatures that depend upon them. With the pelican dead and no longer dependent upon Storm Boy, he decides to leave his home on the Coorong and go to school in Adelaide to read and write. Growing up is therefore a hard lesson that is full of the pains and tribulations of life, and never a happy journey without a nagging awareness of loss. Storm Boy 1963 is therefore a simple, poignant story, but with significant ideas that are reiterated in continual threads throughout his works. 4 themes or abiding concerns surface in most of Thiele's works. Firstly is his unmistakable love for the Australian landscape, from the framing areas in South Australia, where he spent his boyhood, to the wild and treacherous coastline of the Coorong and coastal regions near the Great Australian Bight. The second theme that runs muted through most of his works is also the primacy of the natural cycles of life as surpassing our own private time zones or a person's lifetime. Nature or the natural world of fauna and flora display a commendable urge to survive and assert amidst all odds, and so people should go in tandem in understanding and empathizing with these natural forces they can't do without. The third theme is Thiele's sensitivity. The third theme is Thiele's sensitivity for those hardworking people, the fisherman community, who tire out themselves through struggles and hardships inherent in their fate and meet the odds of survival with admiring resilience of spirit, more praiseworthy and strong than the unpredictable sea and the shifting of seasons. The fourth and possibly the most significant idea that runs through Thiele's work is the courage children display under adversity, both under conservative parents and teachers, or under situations that are beyond their control. Growing up and achieving independence in Thiele's stories come at a great cost, from a deeper realization of the idea that one has to accept what one cannot be changed, from Thiele's illustrated storybooks for children to stories written for adult readers. These four categories sustain themselves throughout. One has to find out the really tender, sensitive, and often precarious relationship between human and animal creatures. Other important stories of Thiele are Albatross 2, 1979, The Hammerhead Light, 1976, Shatterbelt, 1987, and its sequel Aftershock, 1992. Also, it is to be remembered that Thiele's childhood depictions are in no way idealized. Bluefin, which tells the stories of tuna fishermen in 1969, was the recipient of a highly commendable award by the Children's Book Council of Australia. David Malhoff is another distinguished international Australian writer whose lyrical mappings of identity, place, and the body also bear upon questions of belonging and national identity. He is an author to date of at least 6 volumes of poetry, several editions of selected poems, 6 novels, 2 novellas, and 3 short story collections, many autobiographical and prose non-fiction publications, a series of libretti for opera, and an original play. In Malhoff's 2 volumes of short stories, Antipodes and Dream Stuff, there is an enormous diversity of content and thematic coherence. In Antipodes, which received positive reviews, Australia is largely set as an object of comparison to other European climes, and the romance of the far against drabness of the near is often the subject matter of these stories. Southern Skies and Old Country treat such themes, while suburban and familiar perspectives surface in stories like The Empty Lunch Tin and Bad Blood. Jacob's Reach and Closer play out on the intersection between desire, dreams, and reality, and their transmuting and transcending boundaries that blur distinctions between the home and the far. The collection and publication of Aboriginal myths and legends have in recent years attracted both black and white writers. The Aboriginal Publications Foundation which together with the Aboriginal Arts Board has helped to accelerate and promote Aboriginal concerns in writing, has also published numerous books of Aboriginal legends. Representative samples of this genre are Dick Rugges's The Great Devil Dingo, 1973, and The Rainbow Serpent, 1978, Joe Nangan's and Hugh Edwards' Joe Nangan's Dreaming, Aboriginal Legends of the Northwest, 1976, the Cornmeal Community College's Darwin Jugberg, Tales from the Spirit Time, 1980, and Visions of Moanzoom Aboriginal Writings from the Kimberley, 1980, offer examples of Aboriginal sensibility through stories, legends, tales, and essays which bring alive the Aboriginal world long after we have ceased to think that it exists. Now, let us summarize. In this module, we briefly discussed about the concept of Aborigine and Aboriginal and how the relation between the Aboriginal people and the white European people has been established. What is the role of 20th century literary movements in building Aboriginal literature in Australia, and how the Australian Aboriginal literature in English or in English translation actually played a role or act as resistance against the white cultural hegemony, and how the cultural dialogues happened between the Aboriginal people and the white people in the history. So for further reading, you can consult the further reading list and the reference section, and the web links provided in reference section and further reading links. For the self-assessment, you can find the self-assessment file here along with this module document. Thank you.